Gentlemen, Lacey Green is at it again. She just loves talking about sex all of the time, while making it seem like men are guilty sexual deviants themselves until proven innocent, and that women are innocent until proven guilty. All in the name of gender equality, of course. So without further ado, let's debunk another dumb bitch feminist trying to make some coin by appealing to women's insecurities.
Here's a little question. Why does everyone think that victims of rape are making it up? I literally do not get it.
Oh, that's okay, Lacey. There's probably a lot of things you don't get, sweetheart. Like, attention from attractive men who still have their dignity, besides when they decide to debunk your bullshit videos. But don't worry, you shouldn't have trouble understanding this soon, once I explain it very simply for you. Many people think women often lie about rape because 10 to 50% of rape allegations are false, depending on where you live in the world. There is also no punishment for false rape allegations in many countries. So women can lie about being raped by someone, put the man in jail with no consequence for them. And there is also a status of assumed female innocence. For example, how you just described women as victims for simply claiming they have been raped. There is also a lot of confusion about what actually defines rape, thanks to people like yourself who try to confuse the definition of rape for their own benefit. So for example, if a woman or a man decides to have a lot of alcohol and then go driving, they will be held responsible for their decisions and be prosecuted for drink driving. However, if a woman gets drunk and then has sex, she can then claim rape if she regrets it the next day, because she's not going to be held accountable for her actions and her decisions. But if a man gets drunk and has sex, he cannot claim he was raped, whether he was or not, because no one will take him seriously. Also, claiming rape can allow women to have an advantage in family court settlements, and claiming to have been raped can also be a great way to excuse infidelity. And shit, some women may even just want to use sensationalism to extract wealth from famous men. Gee, can you think of anyone who would want to do that? And yeah, I could source all of these claims as though Google doesn't exist and you can't find them out for yourself, but logic just doesn't appeal to ideologies like feminism. So they'll just essentially ignore the data that conflicts with their narrative. So fuck you, I'm not wasting my time on that.
One of the highest profile conversations has been about Bill Cosby. 35 different women have accused him of sexual violation.
That's actually a very great point, Lacey, because we all know as soon as 35 women say the same thing, objective truth then just dissolves and is replaced with the female narrative. But yeah, in all seriousness, of those 35 women, what objective evidence have they actually put forward? Because from what I can tell, from what I've seen, most of the women just use feelings as evidence, expecting men to just run to their rescue without any rational thought, like good white knights.
He was very slowly breaking me down, getting me very dependent on him. I was very, very scared of him. I was very strictly watched over, and I was very ashamed and very scared.
Nobody believes them and thinks that they're lying. 35 women have spoken out, and Cosby still has ardent defenders and gets standing ovations on his national tour. Think about that. If 35 women can come forward and still be doubted, what chance does one woman have?
Oh, Lacey, that's just not how the world works, sweetheart. There's way more than 35 people on the planet who believe that you are too stupid to actually exist. Yet there you are, infecting the minds of impressionable young girls. Why? So that you can mold them into feminist agents with female superiority and victim complexes. Gosh, you must have some serious daddy issues.
I think Jay Leno laid it out pretty nicely. Quote, I don't know why it's so hard to believe women. Go to Saudi Arabia and you need 2 women to testify against a man. Here, you need 25, unquote.
The validity of information, Lacey, relies upon empirical data, not how many women are communicating the same information. But you know what? That's just the exact same feminist mob rule mentality that motivates you. I can tell. You're saying that 25 women ganging up against one man with no evidence, and we should just believe the women by default because feminism doesn't want equality. It wants men to be assumed guilty until proven innocent, and it wants women to be not held accountable for their actions, placing their feelings at higher value than objective truth, while still expecting people to buy the dictionary definition of feminism, meaning equal rights for both genders. Give me a fucking break.
Even more interesting is the fact that literally nobody paid attention to these women until a man, Hannibal Buress, spoke up about it. Yes, I do love Hannibal, can at least have his babies thanked.
I think I speak for the majority of men here when I say, Lacey, for fuck's sake, please do not reproduce. And I think that way more than 35 men will agree with me. So you better not, or you're breaking your own stupid rules.
Seriously though, y'all, why don't people trust rape survivors? I think there's a related trend here. People don't trust women.
Lacey, this isn't a gender issue. I know you like to make everything about sex. I'm not too sure why yet, but I'm assuming some kind of traumatic event took place in your childhood that scarred you into adulthood. But Lacey, trust is something people earn, not have by default. Women have to earn their trust by telling the truth, not simply lying for their own self-interest, like many have proven to do in the past. And Lacey, could you make it any more obvious that you're trying to make it seem as though men are guilty by default, and women should be trusted by default? And no, showing a black man with love hearts and saying you want to reproduce with him is not going to fool me. I know, Lacey, that you were just trying to hide your obvious prejudices against men of colour, assuming that all black men are rapists until proven otherwise.
It took a super viral video showing how a woman was treated walking down the street for society to acknowledge that, okay, maybe street harassment is a real thing.
How you doing today? What's up, beautiful? Have a good day. Hey, what's up, girl? How you doing? Somebody's acknowledging you. She's a naked.
Yes, street compliments. Street harassment is definitely a real thing. See, women make up 85% of consumer purchases, often investing in vanity items, fashion, and accessories in order to attract attention from males, who preferably earn more money than themselves. When the man who is giving the woman attention earns more than herself, it's a charming man. But when the man earns the same as her, it's just a flattering man. But if the man earns less than her, or is black, then it's just street harassment.
Studies have demonstrated that even in the face of hard evidence, men still don't believe that female scientists face sexism in the workplace.
Science, eh? I'm a fan of science. Did you know that 4 experiments confirmed that women's automatic in-group bias is remarkably stronger than men's, and investigated explanations for this sex difference derived from potential sources of implicit attitudes? In experiment 1, only women, not men, showed cognitive balance among in-group bias, identity, and self-esteem, revealing that men lack a mechanism that bolsters automatic in-group preference, or as you call it, sexism. So experiments 2 and 3 found pro-female bias to the extent that participants automatically favoured their mothers over their fathers, or associated the male gender with violence, suggesting that maternal bonding and male intimidation influence gender attitudes. Experiment 4 showed that for sexually experienced men, the more positive their attitude was towards sex, the more they implicitly favoured women. So, in concert, the findings helped explain sex differences in automatic in-group bias and underscore the uniqueness of gender for intergroup relations theorists. And I might also add that women preferring women over men is something that's very culturally reinforced through the ideologies that people like yourself push forward, like feminism, and that men favouring women over men is also traditionally ingrained. It's essentially a mating strategy where the man is showing his compassion and altruism to women in order to attract them as viable mating candidates. And even if he is not doing that for that consciously, a lot of it is subconsciously ingrained behaviour, where men will try and seek female validation to boost their own ego. So Lacey, if sexism is an issue, it is mostly that women are more favourable towards women, and that men are also more favourable towards women, and that you're simply pushing the narrative that men are oppressing women because you want to pursue affirmative action against men. You essentially want to discriminate against men for the benefit of females, or as I like to call it, the short-term benefit of females, because in the long run, it's not good for anyone to limit male innovative capacity and potential, or convict them of crimes without sufficient evidence.
You think that women are making it all up? The society-wide belief that women are liars stems in part from the belief that women are overly emotional, irrational, crazy, or hysterical.
And believe it or not, Lacey, sometimes beliefs are actually founded in reality with an empirical basis. According to this source, it's clear that estrogen, a largely dominant hormone in females, is closely linked with women's emotional well-being. Surprise, surprise. So depression and anxiety affect women in their estrogen-producing years more often than men or post-menopausal women. So estrogen is also linked to mood disruptions that occur only in women, including premenstrual syndrome, premenstrual dysphoric disorder, and postpartum depression. Also, men have higher levels of testosterone than women, and testosterone helps fight depression. So once again, thanks to science, we can see that there is a legitimate reason for this belief. It is not simply subjective opinion or feelings.
Over at Very Smart Brothers, Damon Young writes about realizing his deeply held belief that women aren't as trustworthy as men. He cites women's crazy overreactions being the butt of the joke in stand-up comedies, the plot line of books and movies, and the crux of most of the conversations he's had with other men about women.
Yeah, no, women never overreact at all, of course not, and if they do, it's definitely not a laughing matter.
Very depressed, like, very mixed up. I was telling people I don't even know what to do with the glass. Like, I've never been in this situation. Do I just sweep it off? Do I need to put it in a certain receptacle? I don't even know.
Because women's feelings can't be trusted, our experiences and our very sense of reality aren't to be trusted either. Are you sure that happened? Are you sure you're being rational? Women learn to question themselves and may feel like they're going crazy.
The act of questioning one's own opinions and perceptions is called introspection. It's a predominantly male trait, and it's associated with sanity, not going crazy.
Similar questions have been asked in recent conversations about racism and police brutality as well. This is something called gaslighting. So our distrust of women is deeply ingrained, and I think that it fuels distrust of rape survivors. Rape victims are nearly universally doubted, and paranoia about them lying dominates every conversation. Even as studies estimate that only 2 to 5% of rape reports contain falsehoods. Compare that to false theft reports, which are at about 10%.
So Lacey, I just did a Google search, and the 2% number is apparently very unreliable and should never be cited. It apparently traces its lineage back to Susan Brownmiller's legendary Against Our Will, and her citation for this figure is in a single speech by a judge before a small group of lawyers. There is other statistics, and one of them is 41%, and this number is apparently a bit more reliable because it's part of a peer-reviewed study. So Lacey, either you have extremely poor research abilities, because this only took me less than a minute to find, or you are blatantly lying to pursue your agenda, thus reinforcing the idea that women are often liars and should not be trusted just by what they're saying.
The amount of people who distrust survivors is hugely disproportionate to the reality of sexual assault. Male rape survivors aren't believed either, but for a different set of reasons. There's a degrading myth that men can't be raped because they're animals that always want sex. He must have wanted it, right? Wrong. The distrust and paranoia ultimately makes it harder for victims to get justice and maintains the power of rapists because they know they won't be held accountable. 97% of rapists never face any punishment. So, too long didn't read version, women aren't crazy liars, men aren't inherently more trustworthy just because they're men, and using this bullshit against people who are victims of a violent crime is messed up. So, let's not. Yay!
Well, you, Lacey, are clearly crazy, or an outright liar that cannot be trusted, because I've proved you've been using misleading statistics to support your sexist agenda under the false pretense of equality, and you provided absolutely no evidence that Bill Cosby is guilty, and simply promote the idea that women should be believed and empirical data should be ignored. So please, Lacey, do the world a favour and stop talking, just shut your big, ugly mouth, and maybe hit the gym a few times a week, and stop projecting your daddy issues onto impressionable young women. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel, and if you can, please make a small donation so I can continue to make videos such as this. Any amounts will be greatly appreciated.
I'd rather death over submission. I ain't loyal to your mission. I fight for my own vision and break out from your mind prisons. It's no holds barred, bitch.